Hey guys, welcome back to Dietitians Who Lift. My name is Summer, I'm a registered dietitian, and today with me we have our guest Paula, who's also a registered dietitian, and I'm so excited to learn more about you and what you do as a dietitian and what you think about and how you approach your strength training and nutrition for yourself. So I'm excited that you're here. Go ahead and say hey, and who are you and what do you do?
Hi, well, thank you for having me, Summer. So I am Paula Carper. I'm a registered dietitian and I'm a women's health strategist. So I work with women in midlife. I primarily focus on working with high achieving women who are over 40. So those women are often in careers. They might be juggling household and parents and all the different things with their children. They might be juggling their careers with along with that. And they're often coming into perimenopause. It might be in their 40s, it might be in their 50s, and they are struggling with all the things that come with that. So I help them through functional testing, I help them through nutrigenomic testing, and work with them to really uncover all the roadblocks to having that energy, having that stable mood, all the things that kind of start to go away or maybe start to roller coaster during those years of perimenopause. So I work with them on nutrition. I have an identical twin sister who really supports me in the fitness area because I actually have taught fitness for many years on and off, taught dance. So just it's been a love and a passion of both of ours for many years. So we kind of feed off of each other and encourage one another in those paths. But also she helps me to encourage people in the fitness part of their journey as well.
Yeah. How long have you been working in this? How long have you been working in this space with this patient population? Because right now, the perimenopause, menopause buzz is all
Mhm.
about, and I imagine you're not fresh to this topic. How
No.
long have you been doing this? Kind of where did this start? Tell
Yeah,
me more.
so it started with my own journey. I mean, I think we hear the stories so much, right? All of our journeys kind of lead us to the path that we're on. A lot of times we have a personal journey that's either a family member or ourselves. And so this was a personal journey for me. I was working in healthcare, and I know you have a story about working in healthcare for a period of time. And it's just a very stressful environment. But I think that for me, working in that environment, I always knew that nutrition and fitness were a huge part of our prevention plan and a part of staying healthy. And so I really was in a system where everybody was kind of sick and we were trying to, help them. But with nutrition, it's very difficult in that environment. As you already know, it's like an acute care environment. It's not really a place where we thrive. And so I was having symptoms and I was looking for answers in the medical system because I already had, some tools of my own, but there were no answers. At the time that I started going through this, there were really no answers. It was like, for me, I struggled with all the energy issues, all the mood issues. It was just a very difficult time. And of course, stress levels were really high. So I went ahead and started really digging deep into my background in biochemistry, in nutrition, and really starting to look for answers to that. And I discovered functional medicine, but I also discovered that perimenopause was something that people weren't talking about. So this was about 10 years ago. And lo and behold, I discovered so many things that I think I had once believed were true, but had almost sort of given up on because in the healthcare system, I didn't see people really promoting those things. So I really went back to my roots of prevention because I worked early on in my career in a hospital wellness center when we thought that was the future of medicine. So we found out that it wasn't, but it was still the heart of what I had always loved, and I really had always continued to pursue on and off like teaching fitness classes and doing things that were related to fitness, and of course just all of my own physical activity that I'd kept up over the years.
Yeah. So how do you feel now that you're seeing perimenopause and menopause like mainstream? Oprah did a special. Everyone's talking about it. I feel like the telehealth platforms platforming people
Yeah.
and getting people access to medications. Full disclosure, I felt like I was going through early perimenopause, had all the symptoms. I'm not yet 40, but pretty close.
Yeah.
Talked to my mom. She's like, "Oh yeah, I stopped having my periods when I was 40." And I'm like, "Oh wow, like this could be like right on online. And I, about a year ago, started a low dose estradiol patch, low dose progesterone, and like night and day difference. Like I was
Yes,
such a biatch to my family prior. I was grouchy. I had acne again. I like was doing all the right things and starting to regain weight and like just right. And then these hormones really made it better. And that was about a year ago. But even it since then, like the topic has just exploded as being so
absolutely.
popular to talk about, which on one hand, I'm like, that's awesome. Like great for the advocacy and awareness and education. But on
Yeah.
the other hand, people are talking about this like we're just discovering it. Like nobody's been doing evidence-based hormone replacement therapy this whole time until Oprah shared it with the, world. So
Yeah.
what's
Yeah.
your take on that? I've been in this space a long time. I'm sure you see things online that you're like, where'd that come from? Like, what's your take?
Well, my take is maybe a little bit different because I've been around a little bit longer. I've been a dietitian for almost 30 years. And so when I was trained, we were trained in, definitely the low fat health movement, and then the fitness movement was really oriented toward like cardio. That was like the thing everybody did. So I think one of the reasons we're seeing a lot of this emphasis on perimenopause is not just that our parents didn't talk about it. And they would, when menopause was mentioned, it was kind of like hush hush, but there was not a term called perimenopause that was really understood. And it really wasn't understood by the general population as like this long time period or this potentially long time period before you actually transitioned into not having your ovarian function. So it was just a really, I think it's just that we've always known perimenopause exists. We just didn't know what to call it, and everybody thought it was menopause, and yes, that is part of that process, but now I think there's a lot of distinction being made about that. um
Distinctions between perimenopause and menopause. Like, how do we know what is what?
yeah, so menopause really is medically defined as like the day that you essentially have not had a period for 12 months. That's essentially menopause. It's like one day. So this is really just kind of a technical term. So when people used to say I'm going through menopause, then I think that mostly what they were talking about was I'm going through perimenopause. I'm transitioning. I'm in that transitional phase. And that's really what perimenopause is. It's the transitional stage between normal cycling and then not cycling. And so when you're a normal cycling woman, anywhere around the age of about 35, you're going to start to slowly lose ovarian function until you eventually stop having ovarian function to release eggs, right? So that's really the difference between the two. But during that time, there are a few different stages in perimenopause where your progesterone is going a little bit lower. Your estrogen might be bouncing around, but it's still a little bit higher. And then as you go through, estrogen is still declining. It's bouncing around as it declines. So it's a roller coaster ride. And it's lower than it was in your normal cycling years. And then progesterone just continues to decrease as well. So that's why, you mentioned being on some hormone replacement, like that's why you're going to have in that perimenopausal stage, oftentimes recommendations from practitioners who do HRT to have some kind of supplementation going on during that phase to really support those hormones, or I should say, elevate those hormones a little bit to get you back into some mood stability and that sort of thing. So I think that's really the differences between the two. But what I see being a real challenge is just that people just didn't know how to talk about it. And also, there was a generation of women who didn't get hormone replacement. That's one factor. And then the other is the lifestyle stuff that was being recommended to women who wanted to stay healthy. When we were doing all the right things, it was low fat diets, it was low calorie diets, and it was a lot of cardio. And if you hit perimenopause doing all those things, in that generation, then you got hit really hard. And so that's really, I think, why it's such a big deal. The other is from the WHI study in 2002. That's what stopped hormone replacement therapy almost in its tracks for that generation of women. So what's happening now is this reawakening of like, oh, this study has been debunked. And now there's a lot of messaging going out about hormone replacement therapy so that women who are going through this can actually be well supported. So you are taking advantage of that information coming out. So yeah, I think there's a lot of people who have been all along continuing to do hormone replacement. But I think that the majority of conventional practitioners were not using it with their patients, right? And that's what we're seeing is this resurgence of that so that women can actually be heard and seen and actually have the care that they deserve.
Yeah. What are some of the lifestyle things that become a struggle through perimenopause? We've kind of touched already on like straight not doing so much cardio, not eating in such a low calorie deficit. Why do you say that? What should we be doing through this time?
Well, I like to take things back to the fundamentals. And so when we think about like how our bodies were designed to work, it's like we have either a rest and digest or a fight or flight sort of, autonomic nervous system opposition. And we'll be in either one state or the other. And so when it comes to the way that we currently live, things are really kind of upside down. We have artificial lighting, we have a food system that's pretty messed up right now. We have lifestyles that are very sedentary. So we've got all this stuff that's kind of backward from the way that we were kind of designed to thrive. And the other thing is that we have very, very high stress levels, and that can be from our, social environment, our work environment. It can be from mental and emotional stresses, or it can be from physiological stressors. And so we've just been bombarded with a lot of stuff. So when we hit perimenopause, we really have to rely more on our stress response system to kind of really take care of some of those hormones and help us through some of that. And when we start to lose those hormones, if our backup system for some of that is really just failing because we have so much stress, then it's going to keep us more in that dysregulated autonomic system. We're going to have much more stress. We're going to have less resilience to stress because that decrease in our hormones is really going to make us less stress resilient. So there's just a lot going on there. And it's kind of a vicious cycle because most women who are about ish and kind of coming into this season are really going to be experiencing maybe the end of raising children, or maybe if they had children later, they're going to have young children. And then they're also going to have parents that might be aging. And they might be kind of in that what they call the sandwich situation, right? And they may be at the peak of their career where they're really, really excelling and really having to perform well. And so there's a lot of factors that play into this. And we just want to make sure that women have the support that they need to continue to do well, whether it's with their family and their relationships or whether it's in their career. We want them to be able to excel because we don't see as many barriers, especially in terms of healthcare for men. And I hate to say that. I'm not trying to be sexist. It's just women have been dismissed over their hormones and their mental health for a very long time. And I think that's part of what's also giving women this moment with perimenopause and menopause.
Yeah. What is some of the workup involved? So somebody comes to you and they say, like, I think I'm going through perimenopause. I think I have these symptoms. So I was treated just based on symptoms. I didn't have to get any labs done. It was like, here's my history. This is what my cycle's doing. These are the symptoms I'm having. Sounds about right. Here you go. Low dose, very little risk, lots of potential benefit, right? And I think about like with the men, right, with testosterone, we like really want to see numbers and like it could be really dangerous to supplement like testosterone in men if they don't actually need it. And like, but they get it all the time. There's little clinics where they can just go get testosterone whenever they want, right?
Absolutely.
So with women, do they need to get labs done to know what their hormones are doing? Because isn't that so my understanding is that those hormones are jumping all over the place when we're in perimenopause. So unless you have a really good idea of exactly where you are in your cycle the day that those labs are drawn, those numbers are really difficult to interpret, right?
Yes.
So
That's true.
what do we need to do to get diagnosed with perimenopause?
Well, in the work that I do, like I do like to get labs, and I like to get labs for a lot of different reasons. So it's not just looking at straight sex hormone labs. And I think that they can be useful, but again, we have to interpret them in context, right? So like you mentioned, taking them on the right day. It's like if we're going to take them on a particular day, I like a day between day 19 and 21 for getting a sample for hormones, for sex hormones, because that's when progesterone is supposed to be peaking. So if it's a cycling woman who may be in perimenopause, we can at least see, is she hitting a peak? What is that peak? And again, we know that that's a little bit of a moving target, not as much as estrogen. Estrogen might be bouncing around. We may not see what we need to see about estrogen, or it may look like it's really, really high, and it might be really high at that point. So we do have to consider symptoms. Like we really have to consider what the symptoms are and really correlate those labs with that. But also know that, I think it's coming back to this, that women, when they're telling you what they're experiencing, you want to believe them. And I think that's something that I think practitioners are really leaning into right now, is believing women when they say, these are my symptoms. And symptom tracking can be really helpful with that, like, because you can start to see trends and patterns to some extent and really kind of know more about what's going on there. But I also like to use nutrigenomic testing. And one of the reasons I use that is because it can really tell us a lot about how personalized focus, at least how your predisposition towards certain things are. So we can look at your predisposition toward metabolic dysfunction, your predisposition toward immune and inflammatory dysfunction, and also a predisposition toward difficulties with some of your hormones. And so a lot of times we'll actually retrospectively see from the genetics why maybe some people had difficulties getting pregnant. So we can really look at that and really see what was going on with them before, but it also is going to play into what's going on now. And we can really support them in ways that are just more fundamental from what I call an upstream medicine perspective. So I like to kind of put all of that information together, but I really like to focus on metabolic health, and that's related to blood sugar, insulin resistance, all those kind of things, because that's where a lot of that strength training is going to factor in, right? Because we're building muscle, which is metabolically active tissue, but we're also going to be able to focus in on what do we need to do specifically in that area. And that's going to really help those hormones to be optimized in whatever phase they're in. If they're in early perimenopause, if they're in later perimenopause, we can optimize their metabolic health. We can get more balance for them, more stability for them all around. So we're not going to change the sex hormone, dropping and going away. We're never going to just fix that problem, but we can affect the baseline health, right? We can really affect overall health for those people.
So when you're working with clients who are in perimenopause, what are some of the like top 3 nutrition topics that you cover? Like,
Oh my gosh.
I in GLP-1 space, right? And weight management, I talk a lot about protein. I talk a lot about fiber, and I talk a lot about like consistency of balanced meals, like just having a routine and habits and, planning. And, those are like my 3, if I had to say protein, fiber, and then just meals. So we're not just snacking, we're not just like fasting all day and then having a big meal, like we're having a routine around
Yeah.
eating. Those are my 3 big ones. What in perimenopause are like your 3 big things that you talk about a lot?
Believe it or not, that's from a nutrition standpoint, that's really some of the bigger focus. Like I'll usually say protein, fiber, and fat. Those are going to be the things that I really focus on. And one of the reasons I have to kind of even focus on fat is focusing on healthy fats, but also because a lot of women coming into this stage of life were kind of indoctrinated into nutrition that was revolving around low fat diets and low calorie diets. So we really have to kind of shift their perspective and really get them to start understanding that it's about nourishment. It's not about restriction. And really the fact that restriction is oftentimes going to put them into a higher stress response. That's going to increase cortisol. That's going to increase all of the things that they're struggling with, right? So outside of nutrition, probably the number one thing that I do focus on is stress reduction, because that's where we usually find out it's not just the mental and emotional stress. Sometimes there are hidden stressors that we have to kind of attack and identify with other lab testing, stool testing, whatever it is that we're having to look and investigate into. So nutritionally, it's pretty much the same thing, but it's really about sustainability, right? It's less about the vanity metrics. It's much more about the sustainability of it all. So I think it's a lot like what you're doing in the GLP space, where you're doing comprehensive programs and support for people in that section, because there's a lot of similarities. When you're on a GLP-1, the risk of protein malnutrition or losing muscle is a lot higher, but it's very similar in the perimenopause and menopause space, because women are more anabolically resistant in that phase. So building muscle is harder. And the tendency is that they're in a trajectory and a trend toward losing muscle slowly over the rest of their lives. So we're really trying to interrupt that pattern, which is a lot like what you're doing in that GLP-1 space.
Do you have patients who are on the GLP-1 medications? I have so many. I think there's such an overlap of the population, right? It's like
Yeah.
we have 40, 50, 60-year-old women struggled with their weight their whole life. They might be having all of these like perimenopausal symptoms. They're tired, they're fatigued, they don't sleep well, they have appetite dysfunction, they don't feel great. They blame it on the weight. And I can't tell you how many people now, because I've been in this space with people with this kind of some of the same clients for like years now. They start the GLP-1, very weight focused.
Hmm.
They lose the weight, they change the habits, and they still feel like crap. And they were like, it's had nothing, like some of your symptoms probably were totally unrelated to the excess weight and were maybe you were going through perimenopause this whole time. And so there's so much overlap. I see people think that like losing the weight is going to solve all these things. And
Yeah,
sometimes it just doesn't. Like weight loss isn't necessarily going to improve your perimenopausal experience. There are women who are not ever overweight who struggle with perimenopause, right?
absolutely.
So it's they overlap, but they're not one and the same. And yet the nutrition recommendations seem to always, I joke about this, right? Like whether you have diabetes or PCOS or infertility or perimenopause or heart disease or a history of stroke, the nutrition stuff I want to talk to you about is all pretty similar.
Yeah.
And none of them require extreme restriction. None of them require complete elimination of food groups. If anything, I talk with people about what to add to their diets.
Yes. Yeah.
Like you were saying with fats, with the GLP-1s, it's interesting because we do recommend a lower fat approach from the standard American diet because those fats can be really triggering for the side effects.
Mhm.
And also high fat foods make it harder to lose weight if the goal is really weight loss, right? But we still need some fats. We still need healthy fats. And so we're looking at ways where how do we add some fish? How do we add chia seeds and some of those avocados and oils and things that are going to support just good health? And it sounds like you do a lot of the same thing with, folks in perimenopause and menopause, irregardless of whether or not they're trying to lose weight.
Yeah, and personally in my practice, I also tend to work a little bit more in terms of the protein, leaning into animal proteins, and that's just because of that leucine threshold that helps stimulate that muscle protein synthesis. So there's definitely some variations, and I think there's a lot of room for personalization, which is one of the other reasons that I use genomic testing, is because when we look at nutrigenomics, we can also look at different factors around carbohydrate metabolism. We can look at fat metabolism issues. We can look at what might be a more optimized diet for the individual instead of really relying on just general dietary information, because there are some variations within human beings, right? So I do think that there's some general principles, and if we weren't living in an environment and dealing with an environment that was so heavily highly processed food oriented and a culture that was just more sedentary, we wouldn't at every stage of life as dietitians be recommending all the same basic fundamentals, right? But we can't ever ignore those fundamentals. And I think that's what we're seeing when we look at like whatever age you are and coming into maybe you have PCOS or maybe you have diabetes or whatever. We're always going to be looking at metabolic health because 94% of the population in America is metabolically dysfunctional. We're dealing with an entire population that's got these issues. So we always have to focus on those fundamentals. And I think that's really going to be important. The other thing I didn't talk much about, and I love to talk about in supporting our health, is light exposure, because we talk about nutrition because we're dietitians, but really light exposure is a huge thing when it comes to circadian rhythms, when it comes to all the different things that affect our body clock and our overall health. And I think that's having a moment too, a little bit. Phototherapy is having a moment. So, all the different light therapies, but just getting out in nature, getting sunlight, all these things really are impactful to our gut microbiome, our metabolic health. And we didn't even talk about gut microbiome. There are changes when we go through perimenopause. We got to support that. But again, fiber becomes a factor. So we're just trying to make sure that we go back to a lot of those fundamentals every time. Because if you're not doing that, all the biohacking in the world isn't going to help, right? We got to really get all these things done. And then you mentioned earlier HRT. I want to touch on this. We get those fundamentals, but really we're never going to get our hormones back. And so just like you're experiencing, some people are going to choose to have hormone replacement and some will choose not to, and that's their right. But I want people to make informed decisions. So that's what we're seeing a lot in this space too, is that people are trying to get women the information they need to make that decision, because we're not going to get our hormones back. And if we want to have hormones that are helping our body function optimally, then we have that option now and we can choose that.
I love that. So it really sounds like what you're saying, and I love your approach. It's very similar to how I talk with people about the GLP-1s too. It's like we've got to get our fundamentals in place, our habits, our choices, our environment, our movement. And then for some people, that's just not enough to overcome the challenges that they're facing, whether it be weight or hormonal changes or gut changes. Like, then we do need that extra level of support and intervention and digging and investigation. And I think I'm even guilty of this, of kind of saying, well, everybody just needs to do the basics. But there are people out there that do the basics so very well and are still needing that like extra intervention. I think that's where people like you come in to really
Absolutely.
fill those gaps of those people who are, like you said, you work with like very accomplished professional women. We're not teaching them what a fiber is. They know what fiber is. They know what protein is. They know what healthy eating looks like. They know they should be strength training. They know they should be walking. And they do all the things and yet don't feel better. And that's really where like maybe the GLP-1 medications or hormone replacement or even further digging and testing like you do with
Yeah.
folks comes in. It's not something, you're not saying everyone needs nutrigenomics, everyone needs gut testing, but if the basics aren't doing what they're doing, then maybe we can go to that next level and dig a little deeper.
Yeah, I think that's true. And we market our services, we market these things in a way that everybody thinks, "Oh, well, you think everybody needs this." And it's like, well, yes, in general, we want to think that everybody needs this kind of support, but we know that there are some people who are going to come to us and they're going to do the fundamentals and they're going to do great. And then
Yeah.
there are other people who are we're going to really have to dig deeper with. And that's great because we've gained those skills to be able to do that, right? And so I think that we really have to look at the fact that marketing really oftentimes makes everything look like everybody needs the same thing, right? And that's why I love personalized medicine. That's why I love the nutrigenomic testing, is because I can really right out the gate come to people and show them, here's how your blueprint looks, how your body's blueprint looks. And we can actually do the fundamentals, but then we can really start tweaking right from the beginning. And that really is powerful.
Yeah. Save them the time because they're busy enough, right? Like,
That's right.
okay.
It's efficient. It's very efficient. And I love efficiency when it comes to nutrition and fitness. It's like, I love moving. I've been a dancer most of my life. It's like, I love movement. But when it comes to like having to build or maintain, there are some things that I don't love about it. And so I'm looking for that efficiency, but also, that's going to make me feel good about myself. I'm going to feel accomplished. Right. So, yeah. So I think it helps us with that too.
There's only so many hours in the day, right? And
Exactly.
I am in that where in a perfect somebody asked me the other day, "Summer, what do you want to do in the future?" And I'm like, I want to have so much free time that I can work out as much as I want every day.
That's
Like, that's
awesome.
where I'm, like, looking forward to, and maybe that's when I'm really old, but it's like, right now, I go to the gym at 5 AM in the morning because I have to get home before my husband goes to work because we have small kids in the house, and, like, you can't just stay at the gym for 3 hours, they gotta go to school, and then I gotta log in and see my clients and work, and then I gotta cook dinner, and then manage the household, and it's like, everyone in our world, I think we don't value enough, you were saying getting outside and getting in the sun. I joke sometimes that like I feel like I'm a lizard. Like if I can go outside and just be, I'm in Florida, and if I can get sun, lived that way my whole life. If I can get sun, I'm in a better mood. And if I don't
Absolutely.
get sun or if it's rainy or cloudy here for too many days in a row, I'm grouchy. And it's like I could never live north. I'm stuck in Florida for the rest of my life, I feel like, or further south because I need sunshine. And it's interesting that we're starting to see these correlations between people who are able to get outside and people who are able to exercise and the way that we live our lives really does impact, I think, our, like you were saying, it all comes back to stress and mental health and management of stress and our capacity to manage the stressors in our life. And the better we are able to manage those things, it kind of the downstream, it's easier to eat our vegetables when we're not stressed out all the time, right? It's easier to
Absolutely.
make healthy choices when
The
we,
neurotransmitters just seem to be pushing us toward the positive things, right?
yeah, and when we sleep well and when we, all of it is interconnected. And so sometimes I get people are like, "Why are you asking me about my sleep? I thought we were going to talk about nutrition." Or, "Why are you asking me about my relationship with my spouse? I thought we were going to talk about my eating." I was like, "Well, how does that relationship impact your eating?" Like everything is connected to what we eat.
Absolutely.
It's not as simple as like, oh, you need this many grams of, omega-3 in a day. It's like, no, like this whole picture matters. How do you manage that in your life? Like I'm private practice must be demanding and you have all these clients, but you still find time for your fitness and your nutrition. How do you balance all of that? What's your kind of
Well,
go-to routine?
it's a good question, and it's very similar to you and some of your other guests that you've had. It's my my practice is a little more flexible, and it leaves a little more flexibility and time in my life, so I can work out whenever I can fit it in, right? I can do that. But generally, I work out in the morning, and certainly it's not super early morning. I am not, I'll admit it to anyone, I'm not an early riser. I like my sleep, and I actually need a little bit more sleep than kind of the average person I find. And so that's kind of interesting. So it's a big priority, but because if I'm working out to build muscle, right? Then I need to make sure I have adequate sleep or else it's just not going to work out, right? My recovery, my rest, that's really important to that. So a lot of times, I am working out in the morning, but it might be like, 8 o'clock in the morning. But then because of the way that I work, I can get on with clients, at 9 or 10, and it's not a big deal because I don't have this big transition of like showering, getting dressed, and going to a work environment. So that's kind of been the pattern. And I do a variety of things. I mean, I do weightlifting and I also do things like rebounding. I've been a Pilates instructor over the years. I sometimes will throw in some Pilates. And then I also do dance stuff because it's just a passion. It's something that I love. So I try to get a variety of things, but like daily, I like walking, I like weightlifting, and I like rebounding. Those are kind of like the things that I have to get in, right?
Yeah. I'm on a
And I
mission.
can actually get that in on my treadmill a lot of times. Like if I can't get out, you know, I have a treadmill at my desk. I can walk while I'm working. So not everybody has that, but like if you have the ability to get a walking pad or something like that, like it's great. It keeps your mood up. It keeps your brain working well. It's a great way to do it.
I have just before this filming this with you, I hosted one of our support groups, and two of my gals that joined the group were on their treadmill. And I was like, "Can I walk while we do this group?" And everybody's like, "It's your group." Like and I'm like, "You know what? I'm going to walk more often on meetings and calls and support groups because I get to do that. And I'm on a
Absolutely.
mission this month to increase my steps. And
That's great.
just those little things are, the steps, the strength training, the nutrition, all super important.
Absolutely.
So if
Absolutely.
people want to work with you, if they want to reach out to you, maybe they're interested in some of these testing things that you provide, how do they get in touch with you? How do they find you?
Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram at Paula Carper RD. I also have a website. It's paulacarper.com. Got to make some adjustments to that. There's some things that need to be adjusted on my site, but Instagram is probably the place I'm spending the most time right now. And that is where you can kind of follow me. I have some things that I am promoting and offering around just testing, just the nutrigenomic testing, and then the basic metabolic and hormone testing. And I do work with people one on one at this time. I still do work with people one on one privately. And I find that that's really helpful for a lot of people, especially when we have high performing women who are more career focused, have a lot going on. They may not have a lot of time for all these things, but they do want that one on one. They do want that support. And so that is how I work with people right now. And I just love it. It's just something that I love doing.
Well, thank you for being here. This was so informative. I think we learned a lot. And I'm so glad that we got to finally talk. And I've enjoyed having you in the Facebook group. So if you are a registered dietitian, you're listening and you like to lift weights, we have a Facebook group called Dietitians Who Lift. If you'd like to be a guest on this podcast, that is where you will schedule yourself to come talk with me and do this just like Paula did. And so far we've had, bariatrics, gut health, Crohn's. I just spoke with Sol this morning, and she works with like busy moms and in the weight management space, but not GLP-1s. And we all have these like niches and areas of expertise that I think we need to platform more dietitians and collaborate and make sure that we are seen as the experts in this space, because there are just so many bros out there with podcasts that just don't know what they're talking about. And I think that registered dietitians are worth promoting. And I'm glad that you're here. And thank you for all that you've done and
Thank you for
contributed
having
to the
me.
field. And I'm sure your clients are thrilled to have you. And so thank you for coming. This was
Thank you
great.
so much.
We'll see you guys next time.